Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Nature Folklore Sessions. It's 27th of February 2022. Well, thank you all for joining me for our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this to your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, craft, performance, and problem solving. And today it's part one of our tree season series, Ogham Trees. And it's titled Ogham Trees rather than being an Ogham presentation, because we're going to go into the tree language story, a kind of tree language story anyway. And so it's going to be quite an exploration into what we pick up from trees, and we're going to explore our forgotten connections to ancient arboreal founded languages and compare them to our current linear languages. By linear, I'm talking about how we write from left to right or right to left, depending on your culture. So in short, we're looking closer as we can to the possible language of trees, and how humans may have used this before we invented scribing. And before I move on, you'll see the sunflowers in the background. And as I say, welcome to you all here as a breakaway from the challenges that's going on around the world. And as far as Ukraine goes, the one thing I can say, obviously, is sunflower's the national flower. And if you grow sunflowers, one thing you will know is that when it's cloudy or raining, the sunflowers actually, they face each other to share their light like that. And that's all I'm going to say on that situation. So, okay, the guests we got today, we got Penny Stevenson. I see she's in the background there. Let's move the pictures along. Yes, Penny Stevenson, lovely poet whose work, I believe, deserves sharing. And I see she's in the back room now, which is fabulous. Edward Duran, he's not come on live yet, but he guested last weekend. Lovely poet focused on nature's themes. And here's the picture of Edward, if you forgot what he looks like. And there it goes again. And we got Anne Bodling. She's in the back room, which is great. And she shared poems with me from a lovely blog, poems that are well worth hearing from her voice. So I'm glad she's come aboard for that. And we'll also have a visit here from Claire Roach. I'm actually at Claire's house, not at Carracroy today. And she's going to be joining me on harps for a couple of Ogham poems. So that's a good treat. In fact, I see she's in the kitchen right now. So as I usually explain, Nature Folklore is brought to you by the support of our appreciated subscribers through Patreon, which is that there. And also for people who don't like going through the PayPal, I've also set up the Buy Me a Coffee, which I think I've got a link for here. That's the Buy Me a Coffee. And you can just use your card on that one. So thank you very much, all you people that help out. Some subscribers are with us every week or join us later. And thank you, because your continued support makes sure that I can stay on the air and fund my monthly subscriptions and so forth. So let's see which early birds have joined us today. And I see there is a few of you, which is lovely. Glenda's here. We're going to have Glenda on again in a week or two. Just made it today from Dublin, Glen Semino. Sherry, our lovely regular Sherry Murphy is back. Good morning, John, everyone from down East Coastal Maine. And Little Wing joined us a little earlier through the YouTube. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for coming on early. Chandler Nichols has come on board. Good morning, everyone, because it's morning where she is. And even Anne Bodling has managed to get a hello there. And even though she's in the back room there, she's found a way around it, which is fabulous. Looking forward to having her on. Anyway, the topic I often rumble about on Nature Folklore is how the Gaels were once tree people. And I should get back to my pictures here. Let's have something on that line. So, yeah, as I say, Gaels being tree people, I think that's a lovely one, isn't it? And how Ireland is now said to be a forest island, being a nation of being forest people without a forest. Ted Cook says that one. And many people exploring Irish mythology, especially the book Invasions, they soon become familiar with the story of the so-called invasion of the Sons of Mill. Here's an artist's impression of them, the Milesians, of course. And these were the Milesians who eventually formed a pact with the Tuatha De Danann. And there's an imagery of the fairy race of the Tuatha De Danann there, one of them. And there's another Milesian picture there of them arriving on a boat. And that in the end, the Tuatha De Danann ruled underground. They ruled the underworld, while the ancient Milesians, they got the surface. They really got the best deal, I suppose. But they couldn't survive if it wasn't for the life-giving of the Tuatha De Danann underground. But I talk about that more on other editions. But the ancient, you go to the UK, what is the UK now, and the ancient Cornavy, which doesn't take the full picture there, and the Canty tribes of ancient Britain, they seem to hold a similar arrival and similar folklore to the Milesians. Here's a nice one. There's a cartoon version of it. There we go. Because they classified. I wish this was. Sorry, this is going backwards and forwards. I've never fixed this problem. Why photos come and go on us. Anyway, one day I will. Anyway, several historians dispute the Milesian story anyway, and they speculate, was that actually an invasion, their arrival and invasion? They question whether this was an age of immigrant migration with several tribes with different cultures, or similar cultures really, and this migration was caused more by weather and climate changes rather than a motivation to conquest. And so around what is now the UK, these various tribes actually attracted the name of Cornovi by the Romans. And yeah, there was that cartoon as well. That's why you got the Roman link. And that's referring to them as, well, the Romans referred to them, and Cornovi, if I'm pronouncing that right, what that meant to the Romans, if translated, they worshipped a horned god. And there's a horned god there. And as I've mentioned in Nature Folklore a few times, the legend of the Sons of Mill does include their father's father, and that's their grandfather, being half human and half hazel tree. I haven't got half human, half hazel tree, but there's a picture of a hazel tree. So through their legend, their grandparents were actually a deer married to a half hazel tree, half human. And we often think of the antlers on deer being related to trees, don't we? So that's it. So as I say, they had the Sons of Mill had a great grandfather who was a hazel tree, and that was while trying to make sense of the surreal story. Also leads me to visions of symbols of the horned god, horn goddess, and both. So I see that relationship, deer, tree, and that's in their ancestry. But without our imagination, we seem to interrelate, as I say, the antlers with tree trunks, don't we? But at this point, I wish I could include Ted Cook's video. He's got an amazing video just to show you who Ted Cook is. There he is planting an oak tree. And he talks about Irish people being a forest people without a forest. Try and get that on YouTube. Look up Ted Cook's videos on YouTube. They're stunning. But I can't play it because I'd be shut down with a copyright infringement. I tried that once before and got a warning. But let's instead consider how the Irish culture since medieval times ended up adopting to turflands. They ended up adopting to turfland landscapes rather than woodlands. And only recently in Ireland has there been a great enthusiasm for restoring native woodlands. And this is becoming far less alien to Irish culture than it was even just a decade ago. And there's now several Irish-born people that are very vocal about returning to much more native forest land, which is great to see. And maybe this is because access to peat and turf is actually becoming very restricted here in Ireland because they're trying to keep the biodiversity that exists on top of the turf. So the cutting has been, but the consequences of that is the turf people to keep a living. They're finding all kinds of excuses to chop trees down so they can sell logs. But that's another story altogether. And I'm going to change my background to something a bit tree-like. There we go. This is something we're going to feature quite a bit now in what I'm going to be talking about if it comes off. There's all sorts of stuff flashing on and off. Anyway, maybe a huge population of increase through Eastern Europe during the Celtic Tiger time through the late 90s, early 2000. A lot of Eastern Europeans came over to Ireland, and they have a passion for forests. They have a huge devotion and a massive folklore with forests. And I think they did have a great influence here. Because when I hosted Bards in the Wood, this was between 2012 and 2018. I'll show you a bit of the Bards in the Woods. That's typical of our goings on. About one of its 3 intents was to encourage more people of Ireland spend more time amongst natural trees, because 2012, the government tried to sell off public forests. Nobody was using them. If you don't use it, you lose it. So they were about to be sold off. So I thought, let's get more people into the woods. And when I promoted this, it was mainly Eastern Europeans that came in, Eastern European born. Very few Irish born came out in the start anyway. But we got there in the end, of course. During the first 2 years, as almost all the attendees were Eastern Europeans. They were blow-ins because the forestry was in their blood. I feel it's wonderful that the connection to forestry now, it has definitely returned to more Irish hearts. But having said that, I haven't checked the sound. I think it's a good time for me to find some headphones, and we'll have our first guest on. Give myself the unwiring of these, which I did at one time, but then I fuffed around. There we go. It's like solitaire working with these things, and I should be more prepared with, but eventually these will get in my ear, and we'll have Penny Stevenson. Let's see if we've got any vocals here, because Penny, she seems to be a quiet, contemplative gardener, very keen on the garden, originally from somewhere in Scotland, I think, and lives in Lincolnshire, and is very passionate about the garden. I believe she's a painter. I know she's a harpist because of the picture that we had, and a lovely poet. And there's a joy that she's actually just brought the whole lot together. She's just had a poem called The Joy of the Seed Catalogue, and it's published in the long-established Amateur Gardening magazine. And there's a copy of it there. She's got that lovely poem. So bring it, it's all there. So let's see if we got Penny here. Hello, Penny. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Oh, you're loud and clear, and you're looking great. Absolutely.
Nice to see you.
That's absolutely fantastic. At last, actually meeting up in some way.
In person, I know. Almost.
But without the harp this time.
No harp today. The harp's up in Lincolnshire, I'm afraid. It's been left behind.
Oh, right, yeah,
sadly.
because you're with your daughter then.
I'm down in the south, the deep south.
Well, you've been invited here because you've got the lovely poem, The Hawthorne Tree. Would you like to tell us a bit about it and then share it with us? It'd be fantastic.
Yes, I've got a deep love of hawthorn trees. The part in North Lincolnshire I live in is absolutely fabulous in that there's huge plantings of hawthorns along the side of the A15. And certainly at autumn time, it's absolutely splendid. It's just like the redness is just wonderful. And it's a great source of food to lots of animals and also to ourselves as well. I've done a lot of hedgerow jams, and I've made some interesting sort of potions out of hawthorn berries. I had a go at making hoisin sauce not so long ago, and that was surprisingly tasty, and also it's very good for us. Apparently it fortifies the heart and it's good for the stomach.
Oh, it certainly does that. It actually saved my life. You saying that once is a funny story. I think I've shared it here a few times, because the first time I had a stroke 10, 11 years ago, I thought I was having a heart attack. So It was in May when the hawthorn flowers were coming out. I dashed outside to the hawthorn. There happened to be some berries still hanging from the year before, so I quickly grabbed some of the blossoms and the berries, and I boiled water, and I made the tea quickly. And and of course at this time I was just about to collapse. Managed to get the tea down me. I suddenly went paralyzed. I thought, oh, I've got this wrong. And when I got wheeled into the hospital, I couldn't move a muscle, but I could speak. And I said to the doctor, I said, sorry, doctor, I think I've done something stupid. I drank some hawthorn tea and I went paralyzed straight after it. And he burst out laughing. And he said, well, if you hadn't done that, you probably wouldn't have been talking to me now. So what he was expressing was that it stopped it. It did arrest it. And I still had my speech. If I hadn't had the hawthorn tea, I might have lost my speech.
That's amazing. It is a blood thinner, isn't it? Actually,
it is that. Yes.
Yeah. So that sounds like taking aspirin. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and see, I've removed you there. That's right. Let's hear your Hawthorne poem. An introduction will be fantastic.
Okay, I've had to put my glasses on because I can't see.
I know the feeling.
Oh. The tree, it is old, it is ancient. It bows to the westerly flows, tracing the form of serpents as the wind through her branches blows. A solitary on the green mound, a secret beneath the roots deep. Below the hillock is hollow, and it's here where the she lie asleep. In her boughs wee birds hunker down, till the storms overhead pass on through. In the light of the moon-silvered landscape, thorns are hung with opals of dew. The berries of Samhain are gone now, picked clean by both bird, man and beast, giving strength to the heart and the stomach, to all who have tasted the feast. Resist from cutting her wood, though. Hang a clutie instead on a bough. Be careful not to uproot her, or to cut her with scythe or a plough, for the she will rise up from their slumber. For them who has great sacred power, they'll steal away your wee babby and turn the milk of the kye to sour. At Beltane, bedecked like a bride, when the snows of her blossom abound, we dance round her sweet-smelling branches, atop of the sacred she mound. We give thanks to the goddess for your gifts, leaf, blossom, and berry, as we dance on the eve of Lunasa, with hearts full of love and so merry. Above us, the curve of the heavens, path of stars through the Milky Way drawn by the feet of the goddess Olwen, from the flower of the lovely hawthorn. All year you provide us with goodness. At Albanarthon you gift us still more. From your bough, sacred mistletoe cut down, taken and placed on the tor. At Imbolc we plant out your children, as life force flows once again to fill up our hedgerows with richness, with the warmth of the sun at Beltane. Where grow hawthorn, ash and oak, there you'll find the fairy folk. Oh, sacred tree, always our protector be. To the south keep safe our path, protect us from the fairies' wrath.
Oh, goodness, that was beautifully done, beautifully read, and you took us through the whole cycle. That was fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us today,
well, thank
Penny.
You. Thank
and
you,
and hope you'll be a regular now. This is you were perfect with this. Thanks very much, Penny Stevenson, everyone, our first guest, and beautifully done. Thank you with the Hawthorne Tree. Let's see what some of you are saying. There's quite a few comments have come in, which is beautiful, which is nice to see. Cliff Carr's on. We're going to have a beautiful poem, Penny. We have a whole hawthorn hedge. Reminds me, I need to trim her soon. Be quick, because I don't know if it's the same with you. 1st of March, it's illegal to cut them after them because the birds are starting to get into their nesting then. And there's all kinds of comments flying up here. Let's see, K Chaos. Ogham, yes, it's an Ogham one. We're not going into the actual dynamics of Ogham. I do that in other sessions. This is going into tree language. that perhaps we express through the Ogham. So it's going to be a bit deeper than perhaps the other Ogham ones. Glad to see this topic on Ogham anyway. And Cliff is saying hello. And we've got Lamina Davis, who's from Tennessee through the YouTube. Fantastic. And earlier, Penny said, afternoon, beautiful background of sunflowers as it was earlier. Now I've got this sort of talking trees, which I'm going to be talking about very soon. Terry Slack Hardwick here from rural Maryland. Hello and good afternoon to you. And Anne loved Penny's words. Thanks very much. And Glenda's loving the poem. Oh, check out Hawthorne Tree. It's lovely. It's very sort of rosy taste. And it's a lovely scent to it. And it's a bit diuretic. But she said that it's wonderful adding any kind of jam or jelly that you add. If you've got hawthorns, it just adds that beautiful tang. It's a wonderful additive to a lot of things that you can use. Very, very useful. The poem was glorious, says Terry Slack. So anyway, as Kay Chaos was saying, some of you are watching today, they're familiar with the Ogham alphabet. And you may interpret the Ogham as translating into tree symbols, which is a very common thing. Let's get back to my photographs on that. And there's a whole collection of tree symbols there. You probably, most of you are familiar with that. And then we tend to translate them into Latin letters that, so they can form the sort of language we've got today. And for example, we tried to do this by attempting to spell our name. That's as soon as we got the Ogham, we want to see what a name looks like in Ogham. And of course, we're Latinizing the Ogham, which is a few steps forward. But to literally venture into the roots of tree language, I love Susan Simmons' work. That's why I got this in the background. The Talking Forest, or whatever you would like to call and describe it. I did invite visionary artist Katie Holden. I've invited her a few times because she's hugely inspired by the trees and by Ogham, but we've yet to get her on the show. No success yet. But I'd still like to feature some of the stuff that Katie Holden presents, along with my own comments on her passions and views, the way I translate them out. Now, Katie Holden, she's a gifted artist from Arden, Louth. I think I got a picture here or something. I got, well, that's definitely Suzanne Simard to get a sort of reference to her up. And here's Katie out amongst the trees herself, a fallen tree. She now lives in New York and kind of based there. But I know she's, through the COVID, she's been trying to return to Ireland. She wants to spend time in Sligo, not far from where I am. But I haven't heard of her progress yet. I've sent her messages, but no response. So I don't know if she's got here yet. But one of Katie's art projects has been the Ih3 Alphabet. And this is her interpretation. And she's reinterpreted the Ogham into her version, which is really of a modern language interpretation rather than an ancient interpretation. And at the end of the show, I'll add links to Katie's work in the comments. But I hope you don't mind me having to go add some Katie's interpretation along with my own in her absence. But Katie said that she was actually inspired to the Ih3 alphabet from James Joyce, from Ulysses. And that's where the idea is seeded and rooted within her. Because within Joyce's story, there's a fantasy tree wedding. And this where, in that ceremony, trees and humans, they entwine together and celebrate the marriage of Miss Fir Conifer of Pine Valley with Jean Waster Norland, I think it is. And that's an artist's impression of the two of them. Jean Weiss, John Weiss, or whatever it is, he was ranger of the Irish National Foresters. But the wedding guests, it said that all the wedding guests were human tree hybrids, a bit like what I was talking about with the Milesians. So Katie was inspired with this idea and this whole passion of human and trees entwinement there. And so the wedding guests, they're all, as I say, they're all human tree hybrids. They seem as if they were inspired, and Katie might have been inspired, or even James Joyce was inspired by that half Hazel grandfather of the Sons of Mill that I shared with you earlier. And I gather Joyce was trying to encourage that symbiotic human relationship with trees, with natural forests. And through this wedding, Joyce portrayed how we could become a marriage of ourselves with trees as well. And here's a lovely artist's impression of that. And I'll distract from this for a moment, as I'm frequently concerned about a sad false anger that's in our mythology. It's a sort of an urban tale that I'm forever getting into discussion with, because this has been amplified during the last 20 years, especially the last decade of the exponential expansion of social media. And that is that Oliver Cromwell came to Ireland, felled all the trees of Ireland, and that only the elite states have grown trees ever since. And that these elite state woodlands and forests, they're very dangerous places to go into. So you don't do that. But fortunately, modern Irish people have founded some wonderful native and natural woodlands. They found some land, they're growing natural woodlands, or they're rescuing woodlands. There's a lot of that going on, because when there's tree felling, where there's these spruce plantations, once they've been clear felled, there's little remnants of ancient forest within them. So a lot of people are actually letting those develop. There's a lot of development with that. It's very recent, probably the last 5 years. There's been a lot of emphasis on that. But there's a lovely company in Sligo, Western Forestry Co-op, who did actually start off as a tree plantation company, but now they have actually gone into promoting, and they help out with expansion of natural native tree forestry in Ireland. And they actually go around teaching how this legend of Cromwell is a false legend. And I'll expand on this shortly. And through the tree season series, I'll probably come back to this a bit. But Katie, she beautifully points out, now, where have I gone? Typical. I've thrown my glasses, as people do. When you throw your glasses, you can't see them. And she points out, if I can get the picture on this, the island's long represented by a woman, Aero. And I like this art. That's it. I want to get an Aero picture up. A fertile woman with flowing hair, Aero, or some people call her Era. Forest covered most of this island now, in the Ice Age. And going back even 10,000 years ago, Ireland was it's temperate climate, so it was totally covered in forestry. This is what happened after the last Ice Age. But once the Mesolithic people, the hunter-gatherers arrived, human culture expressed itself out in nature. They created altered landscapes, and they started chopping off Aereo's curls. And then the forestry ecosystem really started to decline when the Neolithics came in. And the megalithic people, they were sort of Pict-like people, and they started clearing land for farming. Started higher up, of course, where there wasn't much in the way of trees, but they gradually came down. And this woodland land clearance process accelerated quickly during the Iron Age, because forest wood was needed, very much in demand, to create charcoal, because the heat of charcoal would allow the creation of iron and steel. And then the Vikings came along, and they harvested mature oaks and ash for building their ships. Then the Normans came in. They wanted some of that, but they couldn't. But they brought in the sycamore trees, and because they grow quite quickly, anybody who works with wood absolutely loves working with sycamore. And then after that, in comes the Spanish, and they started taking the rest of the oaks that were on the west of Ireland to build their navy. And so by the time Cromwell arrived to grab oaks, it was his intent, I gather, to take away the oaks for the British Royal Navy, but there was hardly any left in Ireland by the time he arrived. So what he did, he introduced beech trees to Ireland, and they're a very useful, tough, hardy, highly efficient tree. And there's a high calorie in them, so they're wonderful as a fuel as well. Though beech tree plantations never really took off as a mass forestry crop, worth the introduction, I think. But that's no excuse. Cromwell, there are stories about Cromwell. He was a cruel bastard, but he did bring the beech trees in. He did, despite the cruelty upon Ireland. But I think it's worth noting you know, it's false about him stealing the forest. That's about one false thing anyway. Anyway, bring up all the beautiful mature. This is what happens when you get the trees. See what you got there amongst beech trees. You got all these bluebells, and that's a Bard in the Woods session. Some people there with that, but sadly, the faster growing and eco-damaging Sitka spruce plantations, they've overtaken the beech trees, and that's what's favored. And they started smothering Ireland. I think it's coming to a stop now because people are becoming more aware. But as I mentioned earlier, I started Bards in the Woods in 2012 to encourage more people into the woods, and we enjoyed picnics there. Oh, I must say that those two there on the left, they're going to be on, I think, in 2 weeks' time on the 20th. So that's regular. Bees are regular, but we're going to get Tony as well. It's his birthday then, but he's going to do something for us. And as I say, the picnic. Now, well, we were supposed to have Edward, but he hasn't come on live. But anyway, on these Bards in the Wood, because Edward helped to start this. There he is. And that was 10 years. As I say, we stopped the Bards in the Woods 2018. I won't go into the reason why. And I'm just checking out to see if Edward's got a struggle. I'm going to ask, where, here, I'm going to send him a message to ask where he is. Might have gone to sleep. Anyway, we're going to try and get Edward. That's one of the guests that's disappeared. But as I say, many more people are restoring and planting native woodlands in Ireland. And I'm going to be sharing interviews with a couple of them through the tree season that we're in the middle of now. In fact, there's 3 of them, I think. Native woodland, we're going to have Gaelic woodland, we're going to have Hawthorne Tree. So those are 3 organizations that are helping people out on small woodland farms in Ireland. So we'll do that. And talking of Bards in the Woods, as I say, Edward, I'm still waiting for him here. He came up with the idea of poetry walks, and we're going to have a man in the next couple of weeks who actually took this over to Norfolk, East Anglia, the idea of poetry walks. Anyway, I'll carry on because Edward's not here. So I better, in fact, let's have a chance to sort of see what you're saying, because I'm going to slide back into the topic in hand in a moment. And we've got the lovely Kate Cloud Sparks is here. Good morning among the trees in Alwa. And Kate Chaos have been getting to know my oaks in my yard. Thanks for learning the use and origin of Ogham. Yeah, we're going to go into some strange stuff that you might not be familiar with the Ogham, and I hope you enjoy that. We're coming up soon. Good book by he likes and Kate Chaos likes this book, Glennie Kindred, The Tree at Ogham. As I say, we do a lot on book suggestions that I tend to. Oh goodness, yeah, it's hard because you'll have to wait for the other ones. I could go on because the approaches are quite incredible, the different ones. But anyway, I better move on. Otherwise, if I talked about the books, we won't get to the rest of them. I'm going to slide back into the topic more. Penny's thanking everybody here. Cliff Carr, thank you. And Terry Slack, thank you for the comments. So, but anyway, slide back into the topic today. It seems many more of us are reading more, and we're watching YouTubes more, of course. And amongst them, we're reading about scientists Hope Jaron, Merlin Sheldrake, Peter Walling, but especially Susan Simard. And all of them, they're attempting to study the language of plants and trees. But these scientists are forever trying to demonstrate and validate how trees and plants talk to each other on the ground. And hence why I got the green screen of that in the back as well. But what I find fascinating in this concept, and I think you'll identify that from that picture, is that all of the forest and woodland tract an engagement in their intimate social behavior. And I'm going to take myself out to give you, that's the full picture while I take myself out of it. And whilst I do that, take the chat out of it as well. But here we go, buttons galore. There, I'm back again. But this all includes the fungi, the algae, the wildflower roots, and all this, the root bugs as well, all the stuff that goes on under the soil. All this talking is going on underground. But once that life gets above ground, right into the sun, it gets very different. It gets very competitive because everything is fighting for the light. It's every plant for themselves. And more fascinating to me is when we actually go to the East and we apply the yin yang. If we try the yin yang of philosophy, the so-called yin feminine, the cold dark, is a dance in balance with the yang masculine hot and light. So this is what we got, underground and the overground. They even demonstrated that ebb and flow of balance between the two that goes on in nature, just shown by the yin yang there. So the cold underground is social to survive and prosper. And to me, it's a bit like cuddling up in a cold bed, isn't it? And but the life below ground does not prosper without that light. Maybe it's challenging with the light, but it won't prosper unless there is that sunlight and warmth coming down. So this is where the balance is essential. And so all this light is coming down and it's warming up the womb below the ground. And then add to this the ridiculous Piscean Age and all the religions that came up. And I hope we're crawling out of that because it got a little bit patriarchal, didn't it? It has been. Let's move on to the Aquarian Age. And I think that Piscean Age did kind of get out balance. It banished and enslaved the dark feminine. And it actually brought upon, it seemed to be last 2,000 years, there's been a lot of cultures that's tried to cast fear about the underground and about the dark feminine. There's been a lot of fear-mongering about that because there's a sort of patriarchal rulership through the religions. And so the stories include fake manifestations of the devil, the various pestilences didn't happen, and especially the diseasing serpents, as well as fairies being scary, all that kind of stuff. And of course, not so long back, we have the witches, which, if you follow a series of the alehouse women, that was kind of a story that was slandered onto them. And the burning by fire, the hangings of them, all Puritan generated. And of course, the other thing, what was Puritan generated, was fear of sex in the womb. The whole mating dance was something to be feared of. It was sinning, wasn't it? It still is with some folk. But the intimacy of the underground, to me, is the source of the purest and most essential visionary wisdom. And don't ever let us lose sight of that. But we humans, we need to add warmth and fire to that underworld in order to ignite it and to encourage it, like those souls there, even though they're all men underground there too. But there we go. That's the way the artist did that. But it's not about following any teachings of religions that encourage us to be fearful and banish the underground. I'd like to welcome your views in the comments or in the archives later about this big subjects anyway. But this nature talking that these lovely scientists and myself, of course, talk about is very different language realm to what we use for day-to-day communication now. When we communicate with each other, like what I'm doing with you, muttering away through the show, we've been conditioned to learning and communicate a language that's linear. And since medieval times, we've had the medieval scribes here. Of course, you go to the Middle East and it goes back further, even with Latin and Greek, it goes back further. But for us, the medieval scribes really started this. They educated us in the linear languages, and that's what they were taught. They were taught Latin and Greek in order to become scholars and teachers themselves. And when you think about it, our Latin-based languages are very focused about talking about things, aren't they? It's all the words are about things. But plants, they don't carry any concepts about things. It seems that plants may accumulate memories, though, but they're memories of conditions. And also maybe mood changes of the life around them, such things as moon changes, sky changes, tide changes, and any appearance changes in the landscape around them, I'm sure do affect trees, that they are sensitive to that. But they don't have the logical ability of making that linear as a translation. So this is shown perhaps in the shape of trees, of how they sort of react to their landscape. You get something like this, quite common on the coastlines. There you go. There's a tree that's reacting to weather and conditions and landscape. and it changes, you know, the chemical makeup changes through their reaction. I think there should be a lot more study in that. And I feel that following our wonder about languages of trees and looking at the underground social networks like what I got behind, and the competitive drive for light space, which I've also pointed out, it all truly encourages to rethink what is our relationship with things that we do through our Latinized type languages. Now, if trees have memories, and recently we talk a lot more about memories in water, for instance, and trees hold a lot of water. So how do trees respond to stress, including our stress? Now, suppose we're amongst the trees, we're stressful. How do they react to that when we're in their presence? Now, if trees do sense stress, how do they turn around and communicate with us in relation to that stress that's in their environment? And if that is so, what could they tell us? And if the trees could tell us something to communicate with our stress, is it something we'd actually listen to? Now, what happens to us when we know or feel that plants and trees, they can actually talk? I'd like to go on that as the next subject. Now, within today's human culture, through our reading and writing, and I suppose in my case, and in a lot of us, through the oral storytellers, we try to organize what we read and even what we doodle to write down and what we hear from the storytellers. We use all this to try to organize ourselves in a very human way, how to make sense of this world. And more recently, due to social networking, we're replacing a lot of reading and writing with photo taking, video making, video watching, and presenting all these. But for most of us, reading and writing is our linear ways of how we try to make sense of the world and its surroundings and how we choose to live here. Now, with trees and plants, their communication seems to be about what they sense. Here's another one with underground chatting going on. And that's passed on from plant to plant. But trees and plants, obviously, they can't accomplish this through a learned linear language like what we do. So we may say their language, we might describe as being psychic or an electric language, or maybe even an energy language. It does seem that trees have memory, and it may be the memory is in the water that they carry. Like with us, as we get older, we go from 60 to 70 or more % water. The tree is a phenomenal amount of water. So I tend to relate to the mythology of the memory in water is what is held within the trees. And trees and plants, they certainly know about stress. Now, translation from these trees, the tree language, we may say, to what we speak. Now, that's a challenge. How can we translate what the trees are saying when we're really fixed on the linear? So I tend to regard our language as being linear, as I've kept repeating, because we write from left to right, right to left, and there are starts and finishes when we do our writing, isn't there? But this is so different to what I feel is going on within the trees and plants. Because to me, it feels like their language is all about cycles and spirals. And when you've got cycles and spirals, there's no beginnings, there's no ends, there's no questions, there's no answers. And when we manage to contemplate and craft ourselves into a similar communication realm, and we can through meditation, through being visionary, and this is what happens when we suddenly let go of all that linearness. When we've sort of got the chatty mind, what we're doing is actually going through a linear process of sort of, we're sort of trying to put pigeonholing ideas in a linear format. And people, when they take exams at school, they do this. Oh, good, I could never do that. What I used to do for myself, and I did get through the exams, is try to lie on my emotions. If I saw something that was perhaps going to be an exam, I would put myself into that picture and I would remember my emotional response. And this is why I like storytellers rather than books, because this is me. I tend to remember the visions from it. And then when you're in the exam room, all those visions come back. So what if that was our language, that we were, we contemplate ourselves amongst the trees and suddenly we're sharing that whole vision of environment And it is. Suddenly all these visions come to us. And when it does, some people call that psychic. And it gives us a kind of prophecy of our presence and a real clarity of what to do. Right, I've got it. I know, I can understand it now. So we may talk about connecting and communicating with trees, with nature on that realm. So it seems that this is possible by allowing ourselves to return to our ancient oral form, which before writing came along, I think even with humans, all they had was that spiral type vision, which is very much how they were at one with the trees. That's the way I see it. And that does seem to be very cyclical and visionary based. And the tree is certainly going to communicate with us. Well, it's not going to communicate with us through a linear language. So in order to be at one and communicate with the trees, we've got to go back in ourselves and understand how to be in that kind of cycle realm. Now, if we break our linear words of joining up letters into a series of symbols instead, do you know, that would force us to respond to language very differently, because we sort of speak words, we speak sentences, we'll speak a paragraph, and I'm just waffling off like now. But what if I slowed down and I took every word and I broke down each of the symbols in a word? You know, if there's 5 letters, there's 5 symbols. And then consider that and contemplate that. We would be using we approach language very differently, I feel. And I think this is because reading a set of symbols rather than a word, it slows us right down and allows us into a very different realm. And each symbol then becomes like a vision prompt. And we forget that each letter in the word was once a graphic symbol. And each letter has just been whittled down into little shorthand symbols, and we join them up together. But the graphic symbols that we had once upon a time, they represented something in nature. I think you know where I'm going to with this now. And we link words and sentences to say something, and those sentences form a linear article, and the article may end up being an essay, it becomes a book. But we don't have the time to contemplate every symbol letter that we put into an essay or a book. So it's probable that what we write in an essay could actually be slowed right down and understood and communicated with just a few symbols because of all the visions. If we slowed down to take each symbol and had a vision for it, and we had, say, a 6-letter word, there's every chance that if we contemplated each of those visions, we've got a complete essay. That's what I'm trying to get to that. So the languages we speak today seem to shape how we think and how others interpret what we think and how we see and live this world. Now, individual words in a story, they do create a fuller meaning if we actually pause to consider them. Now, when we write poetry, and I think the poets here will understand this. Let's see, I've got something here. No, it's missing. I didn't have the. Anyway, I had something about. I got a picture, and it's a picture of. Sorry, it's not up. It was a picture of someone writing poetry, anyway. But we change words to attempt to change the meanings and visions in poetry, because it's a real struggle trying to communicate a poem to our audience. Because with poetry, we feel we cannot find the true word that truly expresses what we feel and vision. So, well, now, talking of that, I think we'll get on to the next guest with that. And I will be relating what I've just said to the Ogham letters very soon. But I'd like to bring on our next guest, who's got a lovely set of poems that she sent me examples to. It's Anne Balding. And she does a very good job putting visions into poetry. And there is, I like this picture. There's Anne. Here is a picture I picked up with a pet there. Lovely. And Anne is a lifelong, she's got a blog. I'll put the link up for in a minute. It's the Earthly Blessings blog. I think I got that somehow in the banner. That's it. That's how you get to the Earthly Blessings blogspot.com. And we're going to feature a poem of Anne's during 4 of these 5 tree season episodes. So I'd love to bring on board a warm welcome to Anne Bodling. Hello, Anne. Good morning to you there. Oh, you're looking great, sounding great, and
thank you.
Absolutely fabulous. And we're going in. I've got to line. Here you go. So I've got to line up pictures for you now, because this is where, with Anne has made a request to. Yes, I've got some pictures. Very good. They're in. They're in position.
Okay.
We got an arrangement here. Anne is going to speak the poetry, and I've got some pictures that she gave me to relate to the poem. But I think, Anne, if you can introduce your poem, we can take it from there.
Okay. I used to live in Maryland in the United States and lived along a river with a riparian forest. And there was a spot along this one trail where this one beech tree in particular called to me. It was a place of communion, is all I can say. We moved from there a couple years ago. And this poem is set in front of this tree. I met her or him in the summer, or going into fall. I left in the winter. So this poem is just entitled Benediction. Some years ago, my mind in tumult, I came to you, and you bowed. Or was it a curtsy? Dressed in green, or was it gold? Your nimble limbs swept towards me when there was no breath of wind, beckoning and offering blessing in your wordless way. The winter woods around you are seldom silent. They are often filled with chips and twitters, unmelodious whistles, squeaks and squawks. But today there is music. The single lilting phrase of a hermit thrush, promise of hope for what is beyond this frozen moment, a promise for the future. On this end of year solstice morning, I have come seeking you. Clothed in tans and silver, your limbs stiffened in the cold, you move less easily now. And yet I have come, needing your benediction. I have come to say goodbye.
Oh, wow. That's beautifully read. Thank you for being with us. And oh, goodness, it's affected you as much as us. That was so gorgeous. And we look forward to you being back again. I think it's next week, isn't it? With another installment.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being with us. Wasn't that beautiful, everyone, from Anne Bodling there. Let's see what the latest comments with that. Chandler Nichols has really got some good commenting going on here. Let's see what trees are also sense love. A good point. I spent much time with trees, listening from season to season. One learns this silent language, a subtle change. And indeed, it's not linear. It's impossible for a tree to be linear, isn't it? My tree was always the first to bud in the spring, last to lose its leaves in autumn. I find this communication quite beautiful and enlightening. It teaches us to listen to more than mere words. Well, it shows you one. Chandler is a regular poet on this show. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that, Chandler. And even she's commenting, and here, beautiful with the poetry there. And then Glenda, poetry, Seeing the Wood and the Tree, Rosemary Rowley, John Hawthorne, editors, a recommendation there. And then there's Penny, Glenn, thank you, do try the tea. And right, and there's a few more coming through, Chandler, and Glenn is saying, how moving. Well, it is a very moving poem, beautifully done. And it's just, she brought it to life. It's funny, as I read it, I kind of got an emotion from it, from reading it from the page. But actually, this is a great example. When I hear Anne read it, there's a whole different meaning, and it really comes more to life. And that's why I encourage people to be live on that. It was so stunning. Penny Stevenson, very beautiful, Anne. Felt standing with you in that space and time. It was like that. Great description. Thank you for that, Penny. And Sherry, beautiful. And thank you so much. You're a blessing. So since this had, I've been, as hope you don't mind this again going into overtime, because it's taken me nearly an hour to start eventually getting into the Ogham stuff here. And I'm going to do a quick flash, if you can get that down, Earthly Blessings at blogspot.com there for Anne. So we're going into the, oh yeah, this is going to be exciting. I wonder if, Claire, are you around, Claire? As you know, at least through me, Ogham is Ireland's earliest form of symbol, translated from oral language and eventually got into scribe writing. Oh, here comes Claire. It'll be a few minutes, but anyway, we're going to have Claire in a minute. And through this transition of oral to scribe language, there are some interesting words that are still with us today that provide clues of how human, words that they provide clues of how human language has actually evolved. I'm going to put them up, and because there's some great spellings here, if I can get them up for you. Here we go. These are the ones. They come, a lot of them, from the Germanic and also the Saxon heritage. We've got Bok, and Bok is book and bush. And they all relate to, you know, it sounds like that's related to book, but that's actually talking about beech trees. And it's a favorite tree. Even today, it's a favorite tree for carving initials on. It's the one where initials seem to last for centuries. Now, another fascinating word is the association of the French livre. And livre, that's book. But the Latin librum originally describes the inner bark of trees. And then we got library, which sort of brings that together as well. Now, one of the Ogham folklore stories is that the Ogham symbols, though we've seen them on the sides of stones, it's said that they were actually first scribed on the inside of birch bark. And if you've ever peeled off birch bark, and it's so soft, you can imagine that being an incredible scribing material. And it's an indication how the word library can translate into a collection of trees rather than a collection of books. So we mainly read from books and magazines, but when we read from books and magazines, they're all made from paper, from trees, most of them anyway. It's practical because we couldn't carry stone around, too heavy for us, even though there is scribing on stone. But we have our modern digital age, and that's probably our first human departure from scribing onto paper into a mix of plastic, metal, and all those other minerals that we use with our digital stuff. But the ancients did scribe onto leather, but that's not as lightweight or as practical as paper either. Now, the scribing of Ogham may have started during the 4th century, but through mythology and folk tales, we hear of Ogham, Ogma, and it's said to be he was a Tuatha De Danann, brother of Dagda, and it said he was the inventor of Ogham as a sign language from as way back as 2000 BC. Now, at this point, I'd like to reintroduce you to my Ogham Tale of the Trees, because I don't really get to talk about this that much. I get it in the background, and that's well, no, that's the wrong one. But that isn't wrong, but this is a symbol. I love this symbol that brings it all together, and this is it's half of my Bathing in the Phase breath book, and this is a series of 20 story poems that's extracted from folklore, and it's spiced with some of my own fiction. And this is focused on the origin and creation of Ogham. And for me, it was inspired by the idea of trees carrying the memory through water that's stored in them. And you may well be familiar with the divination interpretation of Ogham. We cover that on another session. So there we go, divination sticks there. And but what I've done is arrange the Ogham, or some people arrange the divination into annual cycles, and I've talked about that at another time. But one of those systems uses 13 Ogham symbols to match each moon cycle. But I'm not going to talk more about that today. And 13 symbols, well, that's one solar cycle. The other system, there is a system that uses the 12 Ogham systems through the year. That's very chaotic. But with Ogham's Tale of the Trees, what I've done is split the 20 symbols into our own full life cycle. And of course, we all live different lengths of life. But during the most mature lives, we do live 4 seasons, I feel. There's our birth and discovery of our individuality. That's our growing time. And then we have our relating and connecting and relationships that are formed by this. That's our blossoming time. And then we have our accomplishments from our unity with other humans and other life. And there's all our fruition and our creation. And then we have our harvesting time. So that's the third season. And then we get into our maturity time when our harvests are gathered, becomes our divinity. And that's our mentoring time when we become mentoring. So all of these 4 seasons, there's 20 symbols. Each of these seasons, they contain 5 Ogham symbols. And if you're familiar with the pentatonic scale, that's 5 notes, 5 notes of Ogham. 5 notes, pentatonic scale, the scale, which was the scale of ancient chants, all that chants and all that gospel music, chant music, call and response that came from Africa and elsewhere. It's all pentatonic, all based on the 5 note scales. So it all connects together. And then you've got, as I say, the 5 for each of the Ogham seasons. So I'm going to share 2 of them with you now, because we're going to do a bit of setup with Claire. And the first one is a recorded, and this one is Gort the Ivy. And the image used is our perception of ivy being a clinging plant that's dependent on each other's plants to survive. But actually, ivy has its own roots and its own survival system, and is often actual support to what it clings to. So Gort the Ivy is all about trust in who we are and what we become. So I've got a video because I got to get this rid of this screen, set up Claire. So we'll give you the video performance, and hopefully we'll be set up, and I'll talk to you about the second one. So this is for your entertainment. This is us at Claire and I way back. Someone recorded this at Carrick. And I've lost the screen. I'll get you back again. There we go. And this is Gort the Ivy. Let love fade away and make us all islands. Never charted, never enchanted, dissolved into the sea and not be seen again. The connected invitation of mankind of creation binds us as a nation, as guests upon this world. And love's expectations, unity celebrations, faith integrations, and one strong binding love is unfurled. Oh, a dainty plant, that ivy green, that creepeth over ruins old, fast she steereth on, though she wears no wings. And a staunch old heart is she, how closely she twinneth, how tight she clings, sharing love with any willing tree. And whole ages have fled, their works decayed, and nations have scattered been, but that stout old ivy shall never fade. From the hail and its hearty green, binding together as king and queen. Oh, it is a plant of unity, is that ivy green. There's a lot of things we may bond with, a lot of things that may pull us back down, maybe tears, maybe pain, and stops our world till we get it spinning again. Hammer may fall, tests our weakness. A saw may grind and cut us and make us branchless. But together, there's always that power to heal. From cold stone to green leaves of warm feel, breathing on where time has been. It's a rare old plant, that ivy green.
Well done.
That's from Owen's Tale of the Trees. Hello, so there we go. I got rid of the green screen, and Claire, where is Claire? Claire's not in the picture. So much for the setting up. How can I get Claire in the picture? Let's see if I can turn this around a bit. There's Claire. She's kind of hidden. See if I can get more light onto her. There you go, a bit more light onto Claire. And we're ready. We're going to actually be live with this one. We haven't done this for 2 or 3 years. And this one we're going to do is called the Hazel. And Claire is going to help me with this one as well. And at the moment, I'm glad to get her. She's setting up a show here for Wood of the House, which is the 7 Ages of Man. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So if you can say a little bit about what's happening tonight, if you can. Sorry, I hope you can.
It's a small farewell concert to the house, and it's about the 7 ages of man, babyhood right up to old age. Glynis Casson and Daniel Costello are actors and singers, and then Miss Claire will do some songs that are inspired by Woodford's location. So we're looking forward to it.
So if you're in the area and you want to come along tonight, there's no charge. It's the last show at Woodford that we know. So put a message or put something in the comments. We can get you here as well. Anyway, Call the Hazel. I'm not going to give any background on that. Hopefully it's self-explaining because you're probably familiar, well, you will do if you've been following the Nature Folklore with I think it was last week or the week before, I talked about the salmon of knowledge and the salmon eating the hazels. So this is about that. And as I say, we haven't done this for 2 or 3 years, so this is going to be interesting. So, and especially with this sort of unprofessional sort of studio things. Here we go with Call the Hazel. In a wise diviner's hand, the forked hazel stretched apart, feeling, sensing what's beneath our vibrant land, and sensing all the living waters, carving an alignment chart of its flow from our divine earthly heart. The hazel wand, tracing the thread of the veil, guiding the diviner's trust. As it casts its spell, we pass slowly, silently through this narrow veil, trusting, anticipating this old ways miracle, finding that point where the living waters becomes a well. Hazel is of mercurial spirit, is a wise sprite, bringer of insight and flashes of inspiration, invites us to discover many things. Entering into the dreaming within the forest, a hazel tree sang to me. It touched me with its fragrant fingers, stroking my dream, calming my dream, and closing the wounds of blood that had clouded my dream. The breathing air touched by the hazel, charged with its quicksilver energy, was charging me with exhilaration and inspiration. The hazel charged my spirit to pulsate, a catalyst, a transformer, about to relate ways to crack any situation, like cracking a hazelnut shell to feed from its nourishment inside. All that pure nourishment, pure goodness, pure knowledge, and in a nutshell, all of the ways of wisdom that we can pass on. And I was now the diviner. I had discovered my source of language, poetry, and music, of course. And mystics, they say, anyone born under the sign of the hazel must never ever hoard their treasure. It's not. The fruits of knowledge must be shared for learning and for pleasure. So play with the thoughts and dreams of others, from social causes to capricious lovers, but be careful. Word wizardry can cut. Remember, your wisdom is inspired by a nut. And that's Call the Hazel. And thanks very much. It's great we got Claire on that. We haven't done that for years. So I hope you enjoyed that and made sense of it. So that's from the this book, The Bathing in the Phase Breath. We haven't recorded it yet, but that's from Call the Hazel on that. I'm not going to bother to put the green screen up for the rest, but you'll find that anywhere that sells books. And I haven't put my link up, so anywhere that sells books. There is a phasebreath.com. I haven't put the link up. See what there's the commenting is going on. Thanks, Claire.
All my best
Lots. Oh yeah, you can say it yourself. Put your head over and there she is.
No, I give you all my best wishes.
Oh, fantastic.
All you amazing poets and musicians and writers and dreamers. So there, and this is the daddy of them too. This fella.
Okay. Everyone's getting moved by Anne's poetry here. Bolted here. Here we go. Glenda, very moving poem. Penny Stevenson, and I think yeah, there we go. Sherry as well. And Kate as well, and Lama was really moved by that as well, and so beautiful. And here we go, in rural Maryland, taking my breath away. And here we go, and Cliff Carr, that's really been the hit of the day. Fantastic. I do have to leave now, says Lama. Catch you on a branch later. Thanks, John and everyone. Go the ivy, yeah. And there we go, mighty enough to take down an oak. What was that? Anyway, there we go. And Cliff is doing some clapping for someone there. Nice to see you and Claire performing together. That was Glenda. Thank you. And Penny Stevenson, harp and voice entwined, and Chandler saying hello to Claire. And exciting and something here, and calming at the same time. Thank you very much. Brilliant. That was a blessing to my soul. Thank you both, Penny. Thank you for all that. The Hazel, yes, that's it. Kate, that's the one. And Chandler likes that, one of my favorites. Last line is brilliant. And all from a nut. Excellent. There we go. What a treat, John and Claire. Okay, I'm running well into overtime. There's a lot more I'd love to add to this session. Of course there is. But I think, and with all the coming and going there, but I think I'll have to move the rest to the Tree Sanctuary session on the 20th, and most of the rest. Anyway, there's a few things I'd like to talk about. I'll talk later on that later edition. I'll talk about the suspected origins of the Gaelic languages and how these are founded from the language of trees, plus the speculation of the human evolution of the language of trees as well. But Gaelic people are said to have evolved from a Gaelic meaning that actually is the people of the trees. And I think I've got some letter that represents that here. There we go. I think that's it. There we go. There's some Gaelic people of the trees. And I'll speak about the possible origins of that and how this has transformed into being a highly respected wisdom. And I thought now for the old ancient alphabet and how it was written. You know, just look at this. This is from Katie Holden. It's written from the roots up, isn't it? Look at that. And all those branches coming out. And each Ogham symbol character has branches sprouting out horizontally from the central line as like a trunk. In other Ogham editions, I show other tree languages around the world. There's a Chinese one that's actually quite ancient Chinese one that's very similar to that, which is fascinating. So the Ogham appearance is like branches sprouted from trunks of a tree. And when Ogham symbols are scribed joined together, they are read from the top of the roots, where the underground is, and then you read upwards. So you start at the bottom, you read upwards at the ground level where the roots are, and then you go up towards the sky. You go up towards the light of the sky. That's how you read the Ogham in that way. But many of us relate to the Ogham as surviving as inscriptions. They're on stone. So there's an Ogham stone to show what we're talking about. There's a bunch of Ogham stones there, actually. But ancient Ogham inscriptions that may have been carved onto trees, of course, they're long gone. And so that the fact that the tree ones, the inscriptions on trees are not here, that might take a lot of our understanding of the tree language to Ogham story away. But I think some of us reach for divination methods as a way of delineating Ogham to try and clarify our sense of Ogham and what it is. And because I think we feel that Ogham is somewhere deep in our psychic memories and within our senses and specific places. When we get to them, we can get the Ogham-related visions, certainly tree-related visions. I've always found solace amongst trees myself, and that's why there's an upcoming Tree Sanctuary edition in the series in 3 weeks' time. Because from a tree sanctuary, I feel that we can truly learn tree language and use it for the visions of our living, whether we use the Ogham prompts or not. And with that, I think I'm going to conclude Ogham trees. As you see, I never really touched on Ogham much this time, but I hope that gives you a feeling behind where the Ogham symbols came from, that language of trees. That's what I really want to emphasize. You know, what is that language of trees and how can we become part of it? So that was what I tried to do today, and I didn't know how to title that really. So let's have one more look at your comments here. Let's see. Is Ogham similar to the ruins? I talk about that in other Ogham episodes through the year. Yeah, the quick answer is yes. Ruins were done in a similar thing. Now, taking it in reverse, take ruins and take the Ogham. They're not exclusive to trees, but what it seems to be is the Ogham has been a great help in being able to interpret the tree language and put it into the Ogham symbol. But going in reverse, there's been references to the Ogham being used as bird symbols, as plant symbols, and even of landscape symbols. So we're talking about, most people think of Ogham and Ogham trees, but no, Ogham wasn't exclusive. You go into Pict mythology, and that's where the Ogham tends to throw itself out a bit. The Picts used a bit of the runes. Certainly the Norse came in. So you look on Pict stones and you've got a real mishmash of all this kind of stuff. But that's for other episodes rather than today. I really wanted to focus on tree language as the subject. So as I mentioned, if that's all of interest, that's the help. That's how I fund this show, because I have to run 3 computers on this. I pay subscriptions for the StreamYard and for the video editing, blah, 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 to keep this afloat. So thank you very much for those who are helping our subscribers. And as I say, there is the Buy Me a Coffee link here. That's it. If you don't like the PayPal, that's for quick tips. That's a good one. I'll put that back up again. Nature Folklore. So coming up, let's tell you what's coming up here in the tree season here. 6th of March, that's next Sunday, isn't it? We've got trees, Aston trees. What can we do? And that's my logo. There's even a website. I need to update that a bit. AstonTrees.com. But it's about what can we do. Part 1 is the start of a 2-part series with suggestions and examples of small things that we can do to encourage the increase of nature tree coverage. And over the next 3 weeks, we've got people running projects here, as I mentioned, Nature Woodland Trust, Home Tree, and Gaelic Tree Woodland projects coming up as well over the next 3 weeks. But without entering into massive corporate buy from us, you know, there's a lot of corporate buy our toilet roll and we'll plant a tree. I'm not going into any of that stuff. I don't like these plant a tree campaigns. I must admit there's a problem. But localized tree planting projects, that's what we're going to be focused on. What can you do? What can you actually do in your garden? How can you actually make your little tree sanctuary even from a small garden? So as I say, we're going to have some inspired guests over the next 2 weeks about that, over the next 2 Sundays. So on the 13th of March, as well as next Sunday, that 13th is going to be What Can We Do Part 2 for the stuff that we can't cover next week. Then on the 20th, isn't it? We go into the tree sanctuary. So there's like a conclusion to what could we do. You know, our tree sanctuary, some of you may have them established, but we're going to talk about that. It's really an extension of the communication that I've been talking about today, along with the practical what can we do. I'm going to bring that all together, and we're going to have that as a conclude for that section in tree sanctuary. And I talked about memory from water as well. So that is going to be the final episode. Unfortunately, this tree sanctuary one, most of you know in Kerikori there's a tree labyrinth, and by that time I'll actually be moved away from that. So it's going to be an explanation of what am I going to be doing for a tree sanctuary. So that's going to be an ongoing story of the new tree sanctuary and how that comes about. So that's going to come into it. So the last edition, the 5th one, is going to be trees and water in folklore. And I love this picture to represent that. There we go. There's actually water going through a tree there. And as well as talk about the she, that's going to bring in the she as well and fae-related stuff. So we're really going to bring everything together, include the she part of it for that episode. And I'm going to talk more about practical purposes of trees by water. I'm going to talk about the craft of riparian forestry management, which is fascinating. It's to do with management of trees growing by rivers, by ponds, by lakes, and that symbiotic relationship that we have that improves the life of everything, all the trees, everything around. So that's going to be a fascinating and very practical conclusion, as well as including the she as well. So we've got some fantastic stuff. So really, oh, goodness me, Edward's appeared. Edward, you let's have a quick hello to Edward. Hello. Sorry we missed you so far. Goodness me. How are you doing there? I haven't got my headphone on. Hi, Edward. Sorry. How are we doing for time here? Right. Hello. How are you doing there? We got a signal? It looks like we got a rough signal with you anyway. Are you around next week, or could you do us a video for next week? No, I think we've sort of lost Edward on that one. That's a shame. But thank you for the guests that we've had today. Sorry that was so blunt with Edward. But we had Penny Stevenson, beautiful poem there. And of course, Anne Bodlin, who's fantastic, and Claire Roach helping me out with the poem here. If you're watching this after the broadcast as an archive video, keep your comments coming and try Edward again. Hello, Edward. Have we got you again?
Hi, John. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, John. Yeah, I'm here.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully the
are you able to join us next week?
Now.
Yeah, I'm actually closing. I'll message you, and we'll message you, and we'll get you back next week. Thanks. That's something to look forward to, because Edward's got some fantastic poems that I'd love to share with you next week. So anyway, I return from time to time in the week to answer your comments. If you're making comments in the week, subscribe with the bell icons if you can. They'll remind you what's coming on. Let's see, there's a few comments here, farewell comments, excited to all of the best on the move. Yeah, that'll be beginning in March. We haven't got the exact date on that. It's a bit of bureaucratic stuff we're going through. Excited to watch the replay, says Amanda Bohu. Thanks very much. And thank you, Cliff. And there's Penny Stevenson, looking forward to the tree sanctuary. especially in sight for smaller places. Question about hazel tree. Let's see what's. I'm only familiar with the hazelnut tree. That's it. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, it can grow very large, can't it? I haven't got. Yes, it does. In the USA, some species that grew very tall and they're enormous. And I did have earlier on. I gave a bit of a jokey one, which was a massive hazel tree with a face on it. Let's see if I can find that again. When you talk, I'm talking about the great grandfather of the sons of meal. See if I can find that photograph for you again. Is it? No, there must be one. Is this it? Yeah, this is it. There you go. So they can be big like that. There we go. Familiar with the hazelnut tree, but in Ireland they're not often that big. So yeah, but that's definitely the one. These stories, there's so many of them growing next to water. They grow quite nicely next to water. I know with us, though, where the tree labyrinth is, it was a bog. So the willow and the alder went in. The willow and the alder drank the water. Then I put the hazel in. And certainly in Scotland, there's hazel trees everywhere. And it's very damp, and you'll get the hazels right next to water there. So fantastic. It's a nut tree that should grow very abundant in Ireland as well, although it keeps the squirrels happy, I should think. But true enough, the legends behind it, the nuts of wisdom, and I brought that up quite recently. I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before, of the salmon feeding off the hazel. And they said he gave them spots and they gave them the wisdom. And then there was two stories, either by eating the salmon, you get the wisdom, or it said that after eating the hazels, it gave them wind, and there was bubbles that came up. And if you actually put your face down where the bubbles that come up, then the salmon wisdom will enchant you. There's two variations on that mythology. Anyway, that's on the hazel trees. Let's see what else there is on that. Let's see what we got here. Catch the replay, missed the opening, got called away. It's worth it. And that's it. That was Edward. Internet was a problem. We'll have a go next week. Who have I missed out on comments here? I'll just have a quick check. We have the hazel tree. Yeah, I think we've covered you all. So that's absolutely brilliant. And it just leaves me, and I think we've done pretty much the hour and a half, which is what we often do. So I'm just going through what I see and what. Right. So that's it. That's as much as I've got for what I can cover. And I've left some for the tree sanctuary time that I couldn't cover today. So enjoy a safe week, full of wonder, the inspirations and enchantments. So until next Sunday, enjoy that and the rest of the season. Play well. And thank you for joining me today. It was great fun to do. It was wonderful. Thank you so much. So bye-bye. We'll see you next Sunday.